In this lesson, you find out how to use the healing tools in Photoshop. You'll notice that I'm working on the boy_face file that's in your Chapter 5 folder, and that I have the Spot Healing Brush tool active. All I really need to do with this tool is have my proper brush size selected. Perhaps I want to retouch this mole or freckle, whatever it is. I'm pressing the right bracket to make my brush size larger and then just painting that out. And notice what a great job this tool does. What it actually is doing is going in and blending and feathering and choosing pixels based upon the closest pixels in that proximity and doing a great job. Now you can also use the Create Texture option, and if I click and drag over the mole off to the right, you'll see it produces a little bit different effect, and it does have a texture in there. Typically, the proximity match works pretty darn good, so I would leave it on there unless there was some special reason why you wanted the texture built. I'm going to choose Command or Control 0 and undo that last retouch. Now, the Healing Brush tool works a little bit differently. It kind of works like the Clone Stamp tool in that you have to define a source point, but that makes me feel like I have a little bit more control sometimes. So if I zoom in, and again, I am just simply using Control in the spacebar or Command in the spacebar, and I'm making my brush size smaller. Notice that if I Alt or Option click, it applies this blue pattern. That's because pattern is selected up here in the options bar. So I'm going to click on sampled instead and then undo that action. And now when I Option or Alt click, I can define a source point. And when I come up here and I click on this mole, you'll see that a little crosshair appears where I define my source point so that I know exactly what pixels I am cloning on top of that little freckle area there. Now, even though it works like the clone tool, it's not exactly like it. In other words, you can't do pixel by pixel cloning with this. If you're trying to clone somebody's eyeball or roof tile or bricks, you don't want to use this tool because it's going to blend those in with the rest of the image. Now, another option is I'm going to press Control 0 using a pattern. And for this, I'll just create a little pattern. Maybe you want a pattern across somebody's face or something to look like a tattoo. I'm going to go to my Custom Shape tool, and you'll notice that I can choose Custom Shapes, and then I can even add custom shapes. Now, I have added some shapes to my panel, and you can do this too by holding down the arrow. You can choose from the panel menu any of these other shapes. Now, these are vector shapes right now, which is fine, but I selected the 4-leaf clover, which is in the nature category. Since I have this set up on the first option, which is creating a shape layer, I don't have to create a new layer. One is already created. And I'm just clicking and dragging out a little clover. Now, if I pull over my layers panel, you'll see that this created a shape layer, and I want to turn this into a pattern because I want to repeat this pattern as I'm using the Healing Brush tool. I want it a slightly different color, so I'm double clicking on the layer thumbnail and choosing a greenish color. And that looks pretty good. Now I have to right click on this layer and choose to rasterize the layer because I can't create a pattern out of a vector shape. I am taking my rectangular marquee tool and I'm defining what I want to be in my pattern. And by defining this with a rectangular marquee, I'm also defining the spacing around each one of these tiles. Now I'm turning off the background so that I have a transparent pattern in the background. And then I'm just simply going up to Edit, Define Pattern. I'll call this Clover, press OK, and turn that off and go back to my background layer. Now I'm going ahead and deselecting. I'm going back to my Healing Brush tool, choosing this new pattern that I made. Click up in Options, get rid of that. I'm going to make my brush size a little bit larger. And you'll see that if I click and paint, that I'm actually painting with, I got a double click in there, I'm painting with the clover, but yet it's going to blend this in to the skin, which is kind of a neat effect. Now I'm going to undo this and choose that I want to multiply this in instead. So you still have blending modes available. Click and drag. Now, other options that I have as well, I have a line checked up here, which means that if I start painting again, they're going to fall into the tiled pattern that I had created. You'll see that they repeat. Now, once it has to rebuild before you see the right repeat, but it will repeat almost like a wallpaper pattern. If you don't want that effect, like you're trying to use waves and you want it to be more random, I'm going to undo this. You can uncheck Align, and then you can just paint randomly where you want these items, and they do not create a pattern. So depending upon the texture that you're trying to play up, you can use either method. But the really cool thing is that it is blending in with the skin. Now I'm pressing F12. I already have my pattern saved. I don't have to worry about losing it. I am creating a new layer. Reason I'm creating a new layer, when you use these healing tools, it's probably a good idea to not touch your original. Now the option I need to select though is current layer and below from the sample drop-down menu. Because if you have a blank layer, it won't blend in your pixels with anything else because it doesn't see that layer below. You can choose all layers if you're working on a multi-layer document, or in this case, I just want current and below. And you'll notice that now, if I come in here and I'll choose a different method, I'll go ahead and choose darken this time. Click and drag out my clover selection. You'll see that this applies. It does blend in with the skin, but yet I can turn it off or on if necessary. Now I'm pressing F12 again because I'm going to show you the patch tool. And if I select the patch tool, you'll notice there are a couple choices here. You can replace the source or the destination, and you'll notice that if I select an area of skin, it's kind of similar to you setting a source point, but you can take a whole entire area. I can do one of two things. If I change this option to replace my destination, I can drag this patch over on top of another area, and it'll fix it. You could have left it at source and dragged what you wanted to replace over to the pixels as well. The really great thing about this is that I typically leave it on destination, and if I have a really scratched up image, I can go ahead and take big patches of good image and drag them on top of that scratched up image and replace large patches at one time, which is helpful.